Taiwan is bursting with heaps of fun places to explore. Join me, Amber Hatfield, as I hit up travel hotspots, soak up some culture, and hunt down hidden gems. Let's go! Hi and welcome back to Let's Go. I'm your host Amber Hatfield, and today I'm talking to Nick Kembel. He is the owner of the website Spiritual Travels, which is an English website about Taiwan, about traveling in Taiwan. And he is a Canadian expat who lived in Taiwan for many years, but now lives in Canada again. He has also written a book about Taiwan as well, called Taiwan in the Eyes of a Foreigner. So I'm really excited to talk to him today about his journey to Taiwan and all his experiences living here. And also we'll have another episode next week where we talk more about his website and everything as well. So I hope you enjoy the episode and let's get into it.
Hi, Amber. Thanks for having me. So I'm from Canada, and I went to in university. I studied anthropology and religious studies, and after I graduated, I just badly wanted to like go out and see all those places I learned about in school. So I just went off backpacking for several years, and I mostly traveled alone and went to like 50 plus countries in that time. And at some point, I just got tired of constantly like coming back home, making money, going off traveling, and I decided to just go live abroad. And so I had a friend who was teaching English in China at the time. He was from the same hometown in Canada as me, and he said, "Why don't you come out to China and teach here? I have a spot for you." So I just got on a plane and went to China and started being an English teacher.
And so how did you kind of make the move from China to Taiwan?
So I went to China in 2008, and it was the same year as the Beijing Olympics. And at the time, like things were getting a little weird and kind of tense in China because there were like some foreigners holding protests against the Olympics for various reasons. And the city that we were teaching in, it was called Shenzhen. It's just right next to Hong Kong. And a lot of the English teachers in that city didn't bother to get proper like teaching visas. They would just do visa runs every few months across the border to Hong Kong. And so we were doing that as well. And with the Olympics coming, things were getting like more tense and they were starting to like care more about things like that. And the vibe was just kind of not right for us at the time. So we decided to just pick a new country and we started learning Chinese in China. So we wanted to go somewhere else that spoke Chinese as well. So we just naturally chose Taiwan.
And so Nick's leap from China to Taiwan marked the beginning of a whole new adventure for him. And in the next part of our conversation, we compared his first impressions of Taiwan with experiences in China, and also including a funny cultural faux pas that he had during his first meal in Taipei.
Yeah, so like all of our impressions of Taiwan at first were very like much in comparison to China because we just come from there. So
Mm.
we couldn't help but notice like it's just very different, two very different places. Like the language was very different. Like we were just starting to learn Chinese, so like we are learning, the basics like the colors and the fruits and the vegetables and things like that. And so
Mm.
many of them were different between the two places, even though it's the same language. And just like mannerisms and daily behavior are quite different. So, like a good example is on our first day in Taipei, me and my best friend we went to like a noodle shop and we were just finished eating our meal. And where we'd lived in China before, when you wanted the bill, you would just like scream for the bill. You'd just be like, "My Dan!" And then like someone would run over and bring it to you. And that's just what you had to do in China. If you didn't do that, then nothing would happen. So we did that in a restaurant in Taipei. And as someone who lives in Taipei, you can understand like how rude that must seem, like two white guys in a restaurant like screaming for the bill. And everyone in the restaurant just like stopped in their places and turned around and stared at us. So it's like an example of like how different things were.
Yeah. And so how long were you kind of in Taiwan before you decided to make it more of a home base?
So I mentioned earlier I'd been backpacking for years, and when I first came to Taiwan, I was still like very much a backpacker at heart.
Mm.
I only ever planned to stay for a year, which at the time for me seemed like a long time because I was used to
Mm.
just like constantly moving around. So a whole year seemed like a big commitment, and my plan was always to do that one year and then just like pick a new part of the world and go try that. And
Mm-hmm.
then I actually did leave Taiwan at the end of my first year. So I planned this big backpacking trip as I always did. And I thought I'd end up who knows where next. And then just like 2 months before I left on that trip, I was taking the MRT to school one day to my job teaching English. and this like short Taiwanese cute woman like walked up to me and like nervously like started chatting with me, and
Mm.
uh, and then I got off at the next stop, and she grabbed my hand and wrote her phone number on my hand because this was like pre smartphone era.
Uh-huh.
And I was like so excited about it that like 10 minutes later, I know you're supposed to wait a while, but like 10 minutes later, I just like called her and I was like, "Can we hang out like tonight?" And then we just like fell for each other. And then I'd already booked this big trip, so I actually left. But then as I was traveling like somewhere in the Middle East, I still was thinking about her and I missed her, and then I decided to come back to Taiwan kind of for her.
Wow, that's such a great love story.
And then so then fast forward a couple of years, like I came back in I guess 2010, and
Hmm.
then by 2013 we were married, and by 2014 we had our first kid.
Wow. Yeah, that's so nice. Wow. It's so interesting to hear that as well. Like that's a kind of a great meeting story compared to today when everything's just like, oh, we swiped on Tinder or something like that.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of lucky. Like we met before we ever had to like either of us ever had to try like online dating or anything like that.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so nice. So then kind of you came back here and then I guess it was just because you were with your partner at the time, which then became your wife, which is why you really just decided to stay. It wasn't really any other reasons.
Like it didn't hurt that Taiwan is just, like such an awesome and very comfortable place to live, and I had spent a
Mm.
year there. So, you know, when you first come as an English teacher, you think a year is a long time, but by the end of 1 year, you're just starting to get comfortable and starting to learn a bit of the language and making some friends. So it actually like really feels like you're just getting started after 1 year. So that wasn't the only reason, of course. Like Taiwan was also
Mm.
just a very amazing and comfortable place to live, so that didn't hurt at all.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It kind of resonates with my story as well because I feel like I was the same way. I thought maybe 6 months or a year in Taiwan and then I would go to somewhere else, but then I ended up staying longer because, especially with learning the language, you do just kind of start to feel a bit more comfortable after a year or a bit more than a year with being able to speak to people and get by in kind of daily life and stuff like that. So I think you do need a bit of a longer time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk to you about your book that you wrote, which was the Taiwan in the Eyes of a Foreigner book. What kind of inspired you to write that book and what was the audience for that? Why did you want to write that book?
So it's pretty connected to what we were just talking about. So when I went away on that last big backpacking trip, I started getting into blogging. And at that time, blogging was like a pretty new thing, and people didn't really blog for money or anything. They just blogged to like more like as a journal of their travels to share with their friends and family. So that's what I started doing. And I was so used to like moving so quickly, like visiting countries for 2 weeks and then writing a blog about it. So when I came back to Taiwan and I was staying for months and then years, it just felt like it made, I was still traveling around Taiwan a lot, and it just the content that I wanted to write just kept adding up to the point where it was like this could just be a book at this point. And
Mm.
my wife, kind of my future wife at that time, played a role in it as well because she liked my photos, and she noticed that the photos I took of Taiwan weren't like your typical like scenic shots and pretty things. Like I like to take pictures of like, you know, parking lots full of scooters or like people on the street and things like that. So she thought my photos showed like a different side of Taiwan, and that
Mm.
the way that I saw Taiwan might appeal to locals who didn't really understand or were curious about how foreigners think of their country. So that's kind
Mm.
of why the name of the book is like Taiwan in the Eyes of a.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because I think that sometimes that when you're in a place for a long time, you almost kind of lose the ability to see the magic in certain parts of things. And then when you see it through someone else's eyes, you can see different stuff. Like when I get new friends who visit me here that haven't been here before, because I've been here a long time now, and they seeing things and their reactions to the things that they see makes me feel like, oh wow, that is actually really different and special, but you kind of get used to it.
Yeah, it makes sense for sure. Say so in that book, I was kind of, I guess, misguided at that time. Like I wanted to write about everything. Like I'd always had a dream of writing a book, so I kind of tried to do too much in one book. So the book was bilingual, and my wife translated the whole thing. So every page was like English on one side and Mandarin on the other side. And so knowing that, I was kind of writing for two very different audiences. So I was writing for like mainly for like other expats in the country or potential visitors, trying to like explain basic things about the culture and what it's like to live there. But at the same time, I was very aware that like a lot of Taiwanese people will be reading this too, and they want to know like the way we think and the way we see things that they think are very normal. So I was really trying to do a lot in one book.
Do you think you would ever consider writing another book?
So I haven't mentioned this yet, but I actually like literally today finished my first ebook, which I'm going to be publishing on my website. We'll probably talk about that later on. But I'm about to publish a like more like a Lonely Planet style travel guide to Taiwan aimed at visitors
Oh,
to the country.
wonderful. Okay, yeah, I'd love to circle back to that later. So, I want to talk a little bit about what you do now, which is writing for your website and also helping people to kind of plan trips and things for Taiwan. So, can you talk a little bit about that, about what it is that you do now?
Sure, I can kind of like speak to how that came about because I did come as an English teacher and I did do that for several years. But teaching English was never really my passion. It was just my kind of way to get my ARC and live in Taiwan. So as soon as I hit 5 years and I got my APRC, and it was actually like we got married, so I had a marriage APRC, and then I just like promptly quit all my teaching jobs and then started doing what I really loved, which is writing. And I think just those early blogs just really I really loved doing that, and it just motivated me to make writing my career. And I started out working for some publishers in Taiwan, doing mostly educational material and editing and writing like mock exams and things like that. And I didn't love that either, but it was still better than teaching.
Mm,
But once I had that book out, then I got a lot of attention for a year or two from like local media and things. Like if you're a foreigner in Taiwan and you do anything that stands out, then the media like just loves hearing like about any foreigner that like loves their country and is doing cool things. So thanks to that attention, I managed to get some kind of better jobs, and I got some jobs writing for local travel magazines and a few like jobs writing articles for bigger news networks. And so at some point, I realized like that's what I really love doing. But just doing the odd job for a magazine or a news network is not really sustainable unless you're like really, really pushing that. And I was simultaneously having kids and trying to be a stay-at-home father, so I just didn't have the time to like do everything. So at some
mm,
point, I just decided to like really just only do my own thing instead of working for other people and just like focus in on my favorite thing of all time, which is like traveling and blogging. So I decided to quit all those other jobs for other people and just start 100% focusing on my own websites. So
mm,
that was around 2018, 2019, which kind of ironically is right around when me and my wife decided to leave Taiwan and move back to Canada, where I come from. So right as we left Taiwan, like within a few months, my website, which was starting to be more and more just about Taiwan, just started skyrocketing and taking off right as we were leaving Taiwan. And then it's kind of a long story, but then we got to Canada and we bought a house and we moved in. And then, like a month later, COVID started and just crushed travel, especially in Taiwan, because Taiwan closed its borders entirely to tourists for over 2 years. And at that point, Taiwan was becoming like my specialty and my niche, and my website was mostly about Taiwan, and all my income was coming from that. And then it just died for like 2 years. And then almost exactly 2 years ago, so 2022, October, they opened up again, and then all of my stuff just like exploded again. So I had a Facebook group growing, and I had a website, and then I started a second website that was just only focused on Taiwan, which is called Taiwan Obsessed. And all of those things just exploded and haven't stopped since then. So to go back to your original question, my websites are travel guides, but like very specific content. So I love details. So what I specialize at is like providing every single detail imaginable to those kind of travelers who are like me, who like to do lots of planning. And there are a lot of travelers like that who come to Taiwan, especially from some other Asian countries in the region, but they speak English. So like Singaporeans are my top traffic. and they're like massive planners. Like they plan every single hour and detail and meal of their trip, and that's kind of how I travel too. So my content like really resonates with them, and they want all the info, and it's hard to find most of that information in English about Taiwan. And so that's what kind of stuff I put out is like just highly detailed guides.
And so, what are some of the places, the kind of things that you do recommend for your trips or travelers to Taiwan? And what kind of things kind of get the best feedback from people, recommendations that you seem to get the best feedback from?
So what I've kind of done is instead of like let's say you're like an Instagrammer or a YouTuber, you might like try to discover the really kind of special or cool places or like really amazing meals and then like introduce them to people. And my approach is more like just like blanket introduction of everything. So
Okay.
I know there's so many different types of travelers out there, and I don't want to just cater to one of them or try to tell people like I only like vegetarian food, so I'm only going to teach you about vegetarian food and try to convince you to eat it. It's more like I want everyone to read my stuff because it's also my source of income. I want as much traffic as I can, and the way I do that is by writing for everybody. So I just cover everything, even places that I don't really love myself, but I know a lot of travelers go there. I'll still go there and I'll still write this epic guide that has every single thing you'd want to know about that place, just for those people who do want to go there. So that's kind of my approach. And of course, like the places I really do love, that will shine through in the end and people can tell. But I still like to provide information about everything that people need to know when they're coming to Taiwan.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. A kind of non-biased, like honest review of everything.
Yeah. And like I do like it probably shines through that I especially love like mountain places and I love like Alishan region of Taiwan. So I love tea. I love drinking like Taiwanese oolong tea. So I love visiting the places where it's grown and the hills and the forests and the mountains in central Taiwan are like my favorite place. And a lot of travelers want to go to that region, but that region's especially complicated for getting to, like especially because there's like complicated train system and the way to book the train, and then there's buses, and the buses are really complicated, and there's different schedules and times, and none of that information is available in English. So all these travelers need that information, and they can't find it in English. So what I do is I'll like use Mandarin websites or Mandarin sources, or even like make phone calls if I have to or whatever. I compile all of that information and then I publish guides that are like step by step with screenshots how to like buy tickets for this bus on this Mandarin website. And then these travelers are able to actually like navigate these systems and do these things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So that's I guess probably like my most appreciated content by my readers, I think.
That's all we got time for today's episode of Let's Go. But join me next week where I continue my conversation with Nick and we will be talking about some of his recommendations for places to visit in Taiwan and upcoming work and other things. So I will see you next week on Let's Go.